Well, until it closes that door, we can start.
Okay.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Big Idea Podcast. My name is Eric. This is Tammy. How you doing, Tammy?
Doing great.
Awesome. Hey, let's talk about January, the whole month.
Ooh, it's cold. Lots of snow.
I can't even imagine that I'm going to be ready for school to
Are
start.
the Cubs still playing in January?
No, but when did they do the the hotel thing, like the Cubs
I don't know.
thing? Is that in January?
I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. This would be a fun one to go to. January? Yes. Yeah. During Blast? Oh. Well, I guess I won't be
I'll
there.
go to it.
Tammy will get to go. We are starting the year with a brand new series that we're very excited about called Dangerous Prayers. Speaking of Blast, actually this content is being used as part of the Blast weekend as well. So we've got that nice Big Idea tie-in with students and adults. It's going to be very cool. Mm-hmm. Very excited, and it is a dangerous prayer that leads us to the 3 C's. So Tammy, why don't you give us an overview of where the overall series is headed.
Okay. Well, this series is intended to be a challenging people to discipleship, or as we would call it, 3C Christ followers type series. And we went with dangerous prayers, and you'll see how that breaks down through the series. But the idea of we're not meant to live just like a comfortable, boring existence as a Christ follower. Following Jesus should be a daring adventure, should be something that involves some danger. And so that's the hook that we're going with for this series. And we will have a focus on the 3 C's. During every week of the series, we're hoping to introduce a new tool that is going to be an online 3C assessment and goal-setting growth guide that hopefully will be something people will begin to utilize here and continue as they take next steps in their spiritual growth.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. So now it's a little goofy because week 1 is New Year's Day, having gone through the Christmas day of the 25th. It turns out that New Year's Day is also a Sunday morning. And so it is a 5-week series, but the content for week 1 and 2 kind of have some similarities. Right?
Yeah, in some ways we have, it will be different content, but in some ways we have a double opening to the series because we know we'll be missing a lot of people on the first. And
but I am fairly confident in saying that week 1 we plan to have to be an all skate video cast teaching from Dave Ferguson.
Yes,
so
correct.
As he kind of introduces this entire series. So it will be available online throughout and all that kind of good stuff. So, but let's jump into week 1.
Okay.
What are we talking about?
The dangerous prayer for this week is "Your will be done," and you'll see the big idea is we're trying to incorporate that actual prayer. That would be the big idea for that week. But this is the introduction to the whole series about becoming dangerous and not just being comfortable, but launching us into the 3 C's. Because when we talk about "Your will be done," one thing, we always want to know, what's God's will for me? What's this? Well, one thing we know God's will is for every single person is that they be a 3C Christ follower in our language, that they be in a relationship with God, a growing relationship with God, growing relationship with the church, with other Christ followers, and a growing relationship with the world. And so when we challenge people to pray, "Thy will be done," we're also going to be challenging them to look at themselves and say, okay, well, those aspects of what I know is God's will for my life, how am I doing?
Yeah, because there's the things that a lot of times when people say, I want to know God's will, it's like they want to know the big secrets. They want to know the specifics of, what am I supposed to be doing, without really kind of understanding that there's some basics that God has already talked about.
Yeah.
God's already asked.
And in some ways, let's get after those and then trust that the other details will fill in as we go.
Very good. And so we introduce the 3C online assessment, in the way in which that gets constructed, and that becomes a part of the whole series, gets introduced there.
Yeah, really these first 2 weeks, we're challenging people to take a look at themselves and get honest about where they're at in their journey as a Christ follower, and hopefully begin to motivate them to go, oh, all right, it's time for me to take a next step.
Gotcha. So the first week is like God's will, thy will be done. Second week then, search me so that I can know my own heart. So I guess that is continuing the introspection there.
Yes, yes. So like we said, a little bit of a double intro. So the specific prayer is search me so that I can know myself. And we'll look at Psalm 139 there and then talk a little bit about what does it mean to ask God to search you. And I like what Richard Foster calls this the prayer of examine. And he talks about that having two aspects, an examine of consciousness in which we begin to look at our lives and say, okay, God, where do I see you at work? And where are you present in my life that I might not be recognizing? And so it's about taking a chance to stop and look at that. And then second of all, an examine of conscience, which is looking at, okay, where in the areas of my life am I not following you? And this bleeds a little bit into the next week as well, so they kind of connect, but that's more looking at the stuff in my life that needs to change. And so I'm not positive content-wise of where we'll go with teaching team stuff, but it's that idea of just, the Socrates thing, the unexamined life is not worth living.
Yeah.
And yet so many of us don't stop and say, God, search me. And so we're going to
and it is a good time of the year to be able to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
without having like this obvious kind of New Year's resolution theme. I mean, these 2 weeks, if you think about them as a pair, I mean, it really is like kind of about, okay, an assessment.
Yeah.
You know, let's
Yes.
assess. I like it. All right, so then we get into kind of the next three, which really hit specifically those 3 C's. So the first week of that pattern, week 3, cleanse me, and we've got celebrate kind of in parentheses.
Yeah. And what we're doing, so if the first 2 weeks are a little bit of an intro, we wanted to, again, through this whole series, we're challenging people to be looking at all 3 C's. But then the last 3 weeks of these series, in some ways you might look at it of like, okay, we're gonna look at each one of these C's and talk about one way that really probably most all of us could take a next step. And so, this week isn't everything about celebrate, but it's about, okay, this part of it that is a pretty common thing that a lot of us could take a next step in. Same thing with connect, same thing when we get to contribute. So in this first week, the thing that we're going to focus on with celebrate is about my relationship with God, is about that stuff in me that is not what it's supposed to be, the sin in me. And so, Lord, cleanse me of my sin so that I can grow closer to you. And in some ways, we're gonna the John 8 passage there is really maybe more of a like springboard into this. That's when the Pharisees drag this woman caught in adultery before them, and you think we always feel like that's our worst nightmare, to have our deepest, our darkest, our ugliest parts exposed.
Right. Like if someone was recording you, and you didn't know it, right?
Yeah.
And then like you heard like, maybe
Wait,
11 years later.
Are we recording?
Oh, no, we're not recording
okay.
right now. Don't worry about now. But I mean, just for example,
Yes.
if
Yes.
somebody like unearthed old recordings of some things that you had said that maybe weren't nice.
Yeah.
That's just an example.
Yeah. And so the reason this is dangerous is praying cleanse me is basically making the decision to expose yourself in not the way that might have sounded.
Well, we have you saying that now forever.
All right. Okay,
so.
good. But anyway, so we're going to look at that of like, what does the prayer of confession look like? And to really, again, focusing on sin, not as breaking rules, but sin as what it does to our relationship with God.
Yeah, a barrier towards intimacy with God,
Yes, yeah.
which is what Celebrate is all about.
Yes,
Is
yes.
that connection between you and God. And yeah, there are other expressions of it, like you said. But this is I think this is great, because I think a lot of times we get tripped up on, like what does celebrate mean? It means coming to church. Well, sort of, but also like that's just a small little part of it. And so then we end up like coming up with like all of these kind of extra things that we want to talk about. But I love this because every single person can take a step in this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's very,
and
very good.
I think most of us tend to not really pay attention to our sin. And then we wonder why we feel distant from God, or
Right. Right.
And so
Right.
I think this will be a good challenging week for most of us.
I love it. I think I'm going to be sick that day. I don't know if I'm going to make it to church, but it sounds like it would be really good
I think
for,
that's-
for
is that
some other
blast?
people. Yeah, that is blast. I actually am not going to be there because I'm going to be
We'll make
at
sure
the Cubs,
he watches
at
the video
I'm
cast.
going to be at the Cubs thing.
We'll make sure he watches the video cast.
I'll watch it, yeah. I'll probably film it. Week 4. Pray for me. Connect. All right. So what part of Connect are we focusing on for week 4?
All right. Well, the title of this one is a little like, whereas all the other weeks are very a prayer that we would pray to God. We went ahead and lived with a little bit of the awkwardness in this of changing that. One, because we wanted a verse that had that actual phrase in it as well. but two, the aspect of connect we're going to look at here, again, something that I think probably almost all of us could grow in, is in our relationships with the church, in our relationships with one another as Christ followers, what might happen if we truly became intercessors for one another? Like if I truly asked people to pray for the real stuff going on in my life, and I actually really prayed for the stuff going on in your life. Not just okay, let's go around the small group one time, write them down, and all pretend that we prayed for them.
Right.
What would happen if we really became intercessors in one another's lives? Because I believe, I'm convicted by this too. I believe there's a whole power that God wants to infuse into our community that we are not tapping into. By not growing in this area. And so that's going to be the challenge to us is to really become people who pray for one another.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so as far as takeaways go, there may be some who aren't in any kind of relationship with other Christ followers, or they're not in a small group. So part of it is get in a small group.
Yes.
And then if you're in a small group, begin to explore this intercessory
Yeah, because
life.
how can you really be having people pray for you and really be praying for them if you don't know them?
And if you're not hearing these things that they're talking about.
Yep.
All right, I love it. I love that takeaway. So let's hit week 5 then. Send me, contribute, and we're wrapping up the series with contribute.
Yes.
That's good.
So we're going to use the Isaiah passage where Isaiah says, "Here I am, send me." I think the plan is that this will be a small group commissioning week.
Yep.
So that is perfect for this idea of we all are sent to particular people, particular places. And so, it is a dangerous prayer to say, "Here I am, send me," because then you're basically saying, God, okay, your agenda, not mine.
Yeah.
And so we're going to look at that. We're going to commission small groups. And I mean, this will probably involve the blessed practices as well, because that's
Sure.
a great way to figure out where you are being sent in that.
Yeah. And I think that this is one of those where when we looked at the overall year, it's like, let's make sure that as we're kind of revamping and reigniting this opportunity for small groups to be commissioned, that we do so in a way that is not outside of the topic of the day, but that really is completely integrated. So I love the fact that, this contribute piece, the send me, is definitely right in line with what we hope to accomplish with the commissioning. And so that part is really exciting. So this is one of those things where, I think as you're brainstorming, as you get further into the process, it's like, yeah, we need to all be in alignment to make sure that small group commissionings are happening on that day. This is not like hey, well, we couldn't do it that way that week, so we're rescheduling it. It's like, no, this really, really needs to be tied to this topic in order for this topic to be most effective. So anyway, that's my stump speech on that.
There you go.
I'm sure you don't disagree.
I'm converted.
That's great. I've got you saying all sorts of stuff in this podcast. All right. Well, that's the big idea. These are dangerous prayers to pray, and they link in very creative ways to the 3 C's. So, and online assessment, small groups. Man, it's going to be a good January.
Yeah, now we just have to do all this stuff.
Right. Not only prepare it, but then actually do it. Okay.
All right.
All
here we
right.
go.
Well, thank you very much, Tammy, for being here. And this has been the Big Idea Podcast, and we will see you next time. So long, everybody.